Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GlobeDocs discussion around the screening of Sally. And my name is Loren King. It's my privilege to be here with the film's director, Deborah Craig, Deborah Alice Craig. Well, that's what it says on your
Mhm. That's
name right there.
that's right.
Thank you for being here, Deborah.
Thank you so much for having me.
So excited to talk with you about the film. And I do want to ask everyone who's sticking with us to enjoy our conversation to enter, if you want, questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. I, of course, have plenty of questions for Deborah, but we'll take some questions from the audience. So please write a question in the Q&A and we'll hopefully get to it. But I'm going to start, Deborah, right away with asking you, I know that you made a short film called A Great Ride that Sally Gearhart was featured in. And was that your introduction to her? And was that how you came about knowing that this woman deserved her own documentary?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a long process from beginning to end, and not always a straight road, which sometimes are the best kind of roads to travel. So I met Sally. I'm a filmmaker, but I also teach public health at San Francisco State University, which sort of coincidentally is where Sally taught. And I was working on a public health project with a colleague of mine, um, and she got a big grant to study lesbian health back in the day where we had grants to look at women's health and lesbian health. And so we were doing a lot of interviews and focus groups and meeting just a lot of such amazing women. And I had been doing short films. Um, and I thought, this is a great research project, but there's also a film in here. So I started making, simultaneously while I was working on the project, making a film about lesbians and aging.
Hmm.
And one of the other women who was working on the project said, well, if you're interested in lesbians and aging, I know an octogenarian who's still living on women's land and cutting her own firewood with a chainsaw. And I was like, oh my God, I really need and want to meet this person. Just the visual that popped into my mind from that was so striking. And it turned out she didn't say Sally, she didn't say Sally Gearhart, she didn't say famous for X, Y, and Z back in the day. She just said octogenarian, women's land, chainsaw, and I thought I want to meet this person. So I went up there to meet her, and only gradually did I all of a sudden get little hints and clues. Wait a minute, this woman was in the film Word Is Out, the classic late 1970s film that sort of normalized gay life. And like, wait a minute, this woman worked with Harvey Milk to defeat the Briggs Initiative in California in the late 70s. And wait a minute, this woman co-founded one of the very first women's studies departments in the country. And wait a minute, and so the more I learned, the more I realized this this is a woman of importance, also of great character. I mean, her personality really stood out, and the more I got to know her, the more I realized this people should know about this woman. And so as soon as I finished the short, we just launched immediately into working on a full-length documentary about Sally.
Was there a sense of urgency, Deborah? I mean, I know many of our viewers will know because these are the questions that come up, how long it takes and how much funding is needed and why the documentary process is so long. But I would imagine with this topic, a sense of urgency of people are aging and some have already died. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we've definitely felt a sense of urgency. When I met Sally, she was about 83 or 84. Then when I started the feature-length documentary about her, she was a few years older than that. She had hearing loss and some cognitive decline, as you can see in the film, and we were really, really working to find friends and colleagues and lovers and compatriots of hers, some of whom were younger than her, but some of whom were older than her. So there definitely was a pressing sense of we need to get this done. And then, of course, The thing is, I'm not a famous filmmaker. I don't have oodles of resources at my fingertips. There's not oodles of resources at any time to make films about radical women or radical lesbians. So I think what I usually tell people is it's a good thing I didn't really know what I was getting into because I didn't quite know I'm getting into between the two films 10 years of my life. It was an incredibly rewarding, incredibly challenging, but incredibly rewarding process.
You mentioned there's so much she did. It's such a big life, and she lived to an old age. I mean, there's a lot there. I imagine that was challenging in many ways to home in on, this. It was almost too much information. Having done so many things, a writer, an activist, a feminist, what she did with the land, creating this utopia. Um, were there things that you wanted to include that you just couldn't, that you chose not to because it was just too much?
Well, it's such an interesting that made the process more challenging, but again more interesting.
Mhm.
I mean, so I think I learned pretty quickly with Sally, nothing is simple.
Yeah.
Okay. And it when at the very, very beginning of the process, I was sometimes telling people a wonderful film about Dolores Huerta came out about maybe 8 years ago or so. And she's another woman who was just a real powerhouse, and she still is. She's still working in well into her 80s. And so I'm saying we're trying to make a film about Sally Gearhart, kind of like the film about Dolores Huerta. But the thing is, it turned out that that wasn't really true because Dolores Huerta really had one key focus her whole life, which was farm workers' rights. And the more I got to know about Sally, the more I realized she really, really is a Renaissance woman. So she has a background in theater, she has a background in communication, she has a background in religion, she has a background in women's studies, she wrote fantasy novels, she was a political activist. So she was just really curious about so many things and interested in so many things that at one point, and had so many people in her circle and so many ex-lovers. We kind of couldn't always keep track of all of that. And so I would go, I think we quickly realized that this was a very complicated person and a very multifaceted person. And we wanted to not oversimplify. And we used to joke that we were going to do a mini series. And then my partner was already like, how many years is this going to take? Was like, no. But you really could. I mean, Sally not only had many, many interests, but she lived such a long life. She lived to be 90, even though she smoked and ate just pure, junk food. That is sort of like a Picasso or a Miles Davis or something. She had all these different periods in her life. So we started to think about both her different interests. Like sort of a agnostic slash atheist who grew up in Berkeley. And I realized many years on, oh my God, we really need to look at religion. It was so central to her upbringing and her being. You know, so we really started to think of her different areas of interest, whether it was theater or communication or her interest in fantasy novels, and also the different time periods in her life and locations in her life. So we felt very fortunate to be able to go back to Virginia. Sally was born in Virginia, grew up in Virginia, went to Sweetbriar College in Virginia, and identified until the very end of her life as a Virginian, as a Southern woman. And then we also went to Texas. So Texas is and a lot of these things are just a little snippet in the film, but they're such a key part of who she was and what she was. So we were looking for places and people that represented all those different important pieces in her life. Maybe you can think of it more as this sort of patchwork quilt rather than as one thing that you're looking at as how do all the different pieces fit together of this,
Oh,
fascinating, charismatic, but also complicated woman.
the range of the interviews of Deborah is amazing. I mean, people from all facets of her life and from this long span of her life. I was very intrigued with the cast of characters you assembled. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, it seemed like almost everyone was eager to talk. I don't know if you had to coax anyone or say, we really want your viewpoint in there. But I'd like to talk about the interviewees because, I mean, besides Jewel and many people that are well known, Cleve Jones, some are not well known.
Yeah, so Sally had so many people in her life, and I would sometimes joke, and she was kind that about all her lovers, because of course Sally had many, many lovers, and we never figured out the complete list of them, but that's okay. But the more important thing I figured out is that Sally had so many friends in her life that were very, very, very long-term friends and that felt a deep connection with her. And so, in addition to trying to find people from the different places in her life and the different, so Texas, Virginia, San Francisco, Willits in Northern California. And then we were trying to find people for the different important her different interests. So people from San Francisco State, whether her students or her colleagues. I was also really trying to push back in time because I was always very, very aware of the fact that I only met Sally in her 80s when she was already experiencing a lot of hearing loss and some memory loss. And so I wanted to push back and find people who had known her for longer. Some of that was not challenging, and some of it was challenging. And so I had a list and a growing list. Of course, everybody I talked to, I would try to find somebody else that they thought was important. And at certain points of time, I would ask people, hey, I really need to talk to somebody from San Francisco State, or I really need to, who should I talk to in Texas? Some people were very, very willing. People like, Ruth Mahaney and other folks in San Francisco were very, very willing to talk, and other folks were not so willing to talk. And I just realized, first of all, Sally was getting frail by the time I met her, and some of her friends were very protective of her, and so were worried about filming, and they didn't know me, and so I just tried to be very careful about that and respectful but persistent, and so and there were people who weren't really were a little bit wary of me and of me filming, that I just eventually got to know them and established trust, or whatever you say, and eventually interviewed them. And some of their interviews are key interviews in the film. That's okay. If, people don't know you, they should ask you questions before they let you film them. And of course, then some people love to be on camera. And Sally had that sense. I mean, we filmed her many, many times, and she always seemed just really pleased to have somebody there, and pleased to have somebody to talk with and to listen to her. And we had other folks who refused. I mean, a woman who hired Sally at San Francisco State, brilliant, brilliant woman. And just I approached her about 10 or 12 times, and she's like, I'm 90, I'm busy, I have much more important things to do than to talk to you. And that's okay. So some of what a little bit, it ends up being happenstance. It's sort of like you have a plan and then happenstance kicks in.
Mm,
And we were very, very lucky. For example, I would find people, I think I told you, I had Sally's Rolodex. She had if there are any young people here, they might not know what it is. But before there were phones, we had these big round things with little cards with people's names and addresses. And I actually found some old contacts of Sally's, including this wonderful woman named Pat Winks, who knew Sally from Sweetbriar College. And they both were class of 1952. In other words, they met each other in 1948.
wow.
And this woman, by coincidence, she still had the same number. I found her. She was in San Francisco, and the first time I talked to her, she came to meet me for coffee, and then she's just invaluable, and just telling us what it was like to be at a women's college at the time and how constraining it was, and at the same time, how liberating it was.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, as you said, she's known for so many things, but for a lot of people, her work with Harvey Milk on the Proposition 6 in California was huge, and you give that you make that very clear in the film. Was it a surprise to you then to discover about the movie Milk in 2008 that did not have her, and that visual that you have in the film where it's the actual debate in '78, and then the clip from the film is quite stark, and then you've got Cleve Jones's and many other people's perceptive comments.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, um, I don't have the world's greatest memory, but I'm guessing that I watched the Milk film when it came out, and didn't know enough about Sally to know that she wasn't in there, but should have been. But right from the get-go, when we started this project, when we were interviewing people, even pre-interviews, people were a huge number of the people we talked to were very, very angry about Sally's omission from the Milk film. So that was really on our radar from the get-go. Um, I so I am always interested to hear what people have to say, and always try to take everything with a grain of salt, because everybody, people, people are rightfully angry, but I wanted to just not take that. I wanted to explore that rather than just make a presumption about what happened. People get left out of films all the
Mhm,
time, not to excuse anything, but I've left people out of films. I feel terribly guilty about it all the time, but it happens. I mean, we interviewed probably over 50 people for the Sally film, and not everybody got in it. And I'm still thinking maybe we should make that mini series so we can get them in. So Sally was left out of that film. It was always in our mind to bring that up. And
mhm,
um, and point that out. It was always in our mind to kind of restore her to her rightful place as a very important person in gay rights and women's rights at a certain point in time. That said, um, I don't think we should. I think we need to take a nuanced view of it. And to me, what I later came to understand is that, well, yes, the film is made by gay men, and gay men may have a different perspective than women, but some of the people in the audience may be familiar with The Times of Harvey Milk, a film made by a gay man about Harvey Milk, which has a beautiful interview of Sally in it, and interviews other women. Sally also was included in Word Is Out, in some other films, Super Dyke, which we have clips of in our film, and A Last Call at Maud's. The other thing about Sally is that Sally did not continue, particularly as a political activist, after Briggs. So I came to see her more as like this brilliant figurehead who was a little bit of an accidental activist. And maybe that's overstating it, but it certainly wasn't her only gig. As she was teaching that whole time, and she pretty much went back to teaching. She retired early, and she moved up to Willits. And so she was not just uh, omitted from the spotlight, she also, by the same token, removed herself from the spotlight in some ways. And so she more or less left San Francisco in 1991, and the Milk film was made in 2008. So
right.
again, not to make any excuses, this is just a way of understanding it. It's that it's not one thing. It's both and. She was omitted, and I can also understand a better why. If she was omitted and she shouldn't have been, and when I dug a little bit deeper, I could see, okay, this is why this happened.
Yeah, yeah. I will get to a couple of questions. We do have a few, but I do want to ask because you brought up her relevancy. The film is so important to me as a historical record, a portrait of an important person, and also rescuing her from being forgotten. And I know that's all you were conscious of all of that. But I know you, as a filmmaker, you don't work so hard on something to make it be a museum piece. I'm sure you want to have this to have relevance to today. How important was it to you to connect with new generations of viewers, new generations of queer activists or just queer people, to know who she was and to recognize that and not have it not just be a historical piece.
Right. Well, so absolutely critical from the get-go, and I think even more so as we went along. So at from the get-go, I was convinced that I was convinced that from the get-go that Sally could have broad appeal, not just to younger queer people, but to other people who are not queer, who are older, younger men, women who like to laugh, like people who are smart and funny. But you never know. That's was what I thought, but I didn't know. So we would do things like, for example, we had some focus groups where we brought in younger queer people to see, could they connect with her, and could they did it seem relevant to them? And usually the answer was a resounding yes, and usually the answer was, I never heard of this person, but
Hmm.
I really do connect with her. So that was really, really important to us. And also, I got a sense from younger queer folks that they were eager to know more about their history. Because I always worried, in the lesbian health study that I mentioned earlier, we did these focus groups, and my colleague Mickey Eliason was very, very funny. And she said, well, the results from our focus groups are that lesbians can't agree on anything, let alone whether we should be called lesbians, gay, queer, or anything along those lines. And so I sometimes worry about a generational divide in the queer LGBTQ or queer community, even just because we don't even use the same words to describe ourselves. But in my little mini sample of people that I encountered in doing this film, I did feel like a hunger for young people to know more about the past. And I also felt that, especially at the beginning, it's critical for young people to know how dangerous it was to be gay at a certain point in time, even for me. Growing up in Berkeley in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't necessarily easy, but it wasn't dangerous. So I wanted people to know that. But the more we worked on the film, the more it became that, because we're in such a rightward swing in this country, and I hope it's, not a particularly controversial thing to say, that we're in such a rightward swing in this country right now, that it felt more and more relevant as we moved on. It's like, oh, it used to be dangerous. It is dangerous now. It is dangerous for people to be trans. It is dangerous for people to be non-conforming, and again, all over again. So the more we worked on the film, the more it became a feeling of not just this is quote unquote corrective. Let's set the record straight on what happened in the 70s and the 80s, and how key Sally was to that. But we need to know this now, because unfortunately, some of the battles that were fought back then and some of the victories that we won back then are, whether for women's rights or gay rights, etc., are being eroded. So it felt more and more relevant to, like, we need to know this information now, so we can figure out how to fight again for gay rights, how to fight again, unfortunately, for women's rights, how to fight again, unfortunately, for immigrants' rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how to do so. And I felt, really, really strongly that Sally was such a great role model in that way of how to get involved in the fight with a spirit of enthusiasm and adventure. It's a bravery, but also just like the sense of adventure, a sense of kind of this can-do spirit that we really, really need. We can't, I know a lot of people that in my circle are like, woe is me. And it's like, sorry guys, we can't really afford that. We need to channel Sally and get, like, get some of our energy back. I mean, I met Sally when she was 83, and I hopped into her car and she drove down the road. She didn't know where the road was, but she was driving at top speed down the road. Okay. So I do think I feel pretty strongly and we worked very hard to get it out before the election. And so I do hope that people see its relevance today as well. I mean, if you look back at the film, it's like we have footage of people marching for the Equal Rights Amendment, We don't have the Equal Rights Amendment, so we still have work to do.
Mhm, mhm. Well, that's a good segue into someone's question that we have here, Deborah. That they said that it's a great movie. I want to bring the film to my small movie group, a bunch of friends. How can I make that happen? Are there ways to stream it? Uh,
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. And so, if let me see, I don't, if folks go to our website, which I don't know, can I call it up? I don't know if there's an easy way to post it, but our website is sallygearhartfilm.com.
mhm.
And there is a way to just reach out and email us. And then, somebody that will come to me or get a response. It is not streaming yet, but there are all different kinds of ways to see it. We do little community screenings. Um, I've done sometimes done Zoom Q&As. Our pricing, we do charge because we're still I won't bore you with a long talk about fundraising, but it goes on eternally. Um, we're very willing to work with people about pricing. And we're very lucky also to be represented by Women Make Movies, an amazing distributor of films, by and about women. And so folks can reach out to them, reach out to us. And then I believe that we should be streaming sometime in the fall. So I don't have an exact date for that, but we should. We're definitely interested to try to get it out into the world in whatever ways we can.
Okay, great, great.
And then
Well, I
I
mean,
see a question from somebody else about a great ride. And the
yeah.
same thing is that just reach out to me if you reach out to me at the Sally Gearhart email and ask about a great ride, I can communicate you. I think it's streaming through Frameline, or just let me know and I'll make a plan to get you that film.
Deborah, has it been at all frustrating for you to have another film called Sally that's out about another icon, Sally Ride?
It's
Is that why you put the exclamation point?
No, actually, I don't know if people know that. So I haven't had the opportunity to see it yet. Our film came out first,
Oh,
and we just had the exclamation point because we thought Sally deserved one. It is just a very odd coincidence that there's another film named Sally about a lesbian who was an astronaut and sounds like an amazing person. I mean, I wouldn't say it's frustrating. It's just an odd
mhm.
coincidence. And, for anybody who's ever worked on film or been in the arts in any way, it is a challenge. It's a challenge to get your work done. It's a challenge to get your work out into the world. So best of luck to that other Sally film. Like maybe we can do some double features or something
Yeah, that would be
sometime. And I know that Sally Gearhart would have been thrilled out of her mind to meet Sally Ride. So
yes.
I think it's just, it's sort of an indication of there's such a wealth of material out there. I mean, in a way, we're in times where we're worried about not being able to get the information we need because there's so much misinformation and disinformation. But it's also just another indicator of the fact that there's so much good material out there. There's so many great people out there working hard to make good films about people who should have films made about them.
No, I think you mentioned that in the film, or maybe it was in one of the other talks I saw you do, where you say making this film about Sally made you see other subjects, possible subjects that many should have films made, or even a short, or whatever it may be. So, did it spark something for your next project, or are you still you're still on this one? I know.
Well, I mean, this is my first feature. So this is it. First, it was a much larger effort to get it to finish it and just cross the finish line. And then it's a bigger effort. Then you realize, oh, thank God I crossed the finish line. I'm done. And then the next day you realize, oh no, work is just starting. So just to try to figure out how to get, so for example, how to get the film not just into film festivals, but how to reach out to nonprofit organizations how to get into colleges and universities. So I think we have our work cut out for us for a little while in that way. Another filmmaker I met, very wise woman, said, take a break. Um, and then I have a lot of project ideas. Um, but it is such a challenge. And again, anybody in the audience who's in the arts knows this. It is such a challenge to be in the arts in a culture that unfortunately doesn't do enough to support the arts, doesn't see the arts as something that's an important investment, and so um, we were lucky enough to get a few good grants. A lot of our funding just came from individual donations. So if you watch the film, the credits go on forever because we're thanking everybody who gave us 5, 10, 20, $50, and most of our donations were small. We got a few good grants, one from California Humanities. You know what? California Humanities just, laid off most of their staff. I know several people whose grants were cut even before they started or halfway through. And so it is a very hard road and getting harder.
Sure.
And then you have to counterbalance that with the fact that filmmaking has become democratized in some ways, and so like young people with an iPhone can do really great work if they know what they're doing. So everybody who's out there who has a film idea, go for it. And I'll help to get back in there myself, but may have a little and again, yes, there's so many people out there doing amazing work and getting older. So just think about the people in your life who who are in their 70s or 80s or more, who other people should know about.
Yeah, yeah, and have great stories to
Have
tell.
great
Yeah.
stories to tell, et cetera, and have
Well,
exactly.
I do want to get to a couple more questions. Tony asks, "Hi, I'm surprised that Sally did not commit to Jane. Was she the longest partner relationship?"
Well, so Sally, if you see in the film several people kind of mention that Sally was not really cut out to be monogamous. And so Sally, in many of her relationships, it was really not 100% clear to me if she left Jane or Jay left her or some combination of the above. What Sally was seemed to be primarily serial monogamy and not really wanting to be tied down to any one person in a romantic relationship, but very, very committed to people for these very close long-term friendships. So when people describe her friendship with Jane, it was sort of like they were lovers, but not lovers any longer. And I think she had several other people in her life like that were incredibly important in very long-term friendships. Um, but she didn't seem to necessarily do very long-term romantic relationships. And again, I try to be a little bit careful because some of what I have is anecdotal information, but I do think I can safely say this because it's anecdotal information from a few people that later in life she would have, she lived in this little cabin in the woods by herself, by choice, and she would have lovers and then she would kick them out and she wouldn't want them spending the night. So she was such a complicated person. She was such a people loving person, such a person with a desire and ability to connect, and a person who needed time alone. I think maybe she felt a little bit of an obligation. I noticed with us, she felt a little bit of an obligation to be on or to perform when we were there. And that, imagine that could get tiring. So I think she needed her space and needed to connect and needed her space there in the woods. But yes, did keep these very, very deep long-term friendships with people.
Well, this is kind of in the same vein, but another question from an audience member. Have you received feedback from some of Sally's friends about the movie? What did they think?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And first of all, we got a lot of feedback during the making of the film, and we wanted to make sure to elicit a lot of feedback to make sure we were on track. Again, I only met Sally when she was in her 80s. Jane had already died, and Jane was really at that point her key support system. Um, and the other thing, I guess, what's a good way to say it? Lesbians can be very strongly opinionated people, and not just lesbians, by the way, older women, older people. And so we got a lot of opinions from people, and some of them were adamantly don't do this, adamantly don't do that, and don't say this and don't say that. And I would always listen very, very carefully. My policy is always to really listen carefully to what people say and not necessarily to do what they want, but to take what they say into account. And so we did have pushback, and like I said, we had pushback from people who were worried about Sally because she was declining in some ways. And so I really wanted to make sure to be very careful about that. I mean, I spent a lot of time caring for frail, aging parents, and I wanted to make sure to be respectful and patient and sensitive. There was also some drama and infighting in some of those communities, the lesbian communities, the Willits community. And so I tried to listen very carefully to those things, but not get involved in personal disputes because I just didn't want the film to be about that. And I also just didn't want to take one person or another person's point of view. What was most gratifying to me was um, the film premiered at Frameline in San Francisco last summer, and we had, I think, at least a dozen people in the audience who were in the film, from
Mhm.
Reverend Jim Matulski, who would bring Sally in to preach, to Pat Winks, who met Sally at Sweetbriar in 1948, to Dorothy Hacker, who met Sally in the 60s, and Ruth Mahaney, and they came over and were very, very happy with the film. And Pat Winks even was just a very sort of brilliant intellectual person, came over in tears talking about how moving it was for her. So not just an intellectual film, but that was a film that people touched people emotionally. So to me, that's been one of the most gratifying things about the whole process is the people who are in the film and who are close to Sally. Pretty much telling us we got it right. Occasionally, we get people telling us we didn't get it quite right, and that's okay too. You have to have a thick skin and just say, "Yeah, and thanks for sharing." And
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Well, that's a great question. Thank you, Mindy,
yeah.
for that question. A few people have asked about seeing the film. We've already addressed that, but I want to make sure people know to go to the website so that they can find out where it might screen again or any information about how it will be screened. Um,
Right. So people can, so if they go to our website, they can see upcoming screenings. For example, there's a screening in Berkeley at the end of June. And there's a screening in India if anybody wants to go to Mumbai. And so you can take a look there, but also don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, we've done screenings in little nonprofits, et cetera, et cetera. We've done screenings at little film festivals in Europe and done Zoom Q&As if one of us is available. I'm the director of the film, but I have two co-directors who are also co-producers, and we all of us sometimes participate in Q&As in some groups. So yeah, just don't hesitate to reach out, and we're eager to find ways to get the film to you or to other people who might be interested.
And then someone commented that other organizations, and I'm sure there were many, could use the film as a fundraiser for their organizations, which is interesting. I mean that would be another way to see it and to get the word out, and then people can use Sally's experience in your film to promote their own work.
Yeah, no,
That
absolutely,
happens.
exactly. I mean, I think there's nothing, finding ways to. So we're one of our current projects, aside from just trying to get the film into festivals and into theaters, is we're working on something called an impact campaign, which most people are like, "What is that?" And it really we're working on a study guide and other materials that people can use if they want to, for example, use the film in their class or if they want to use it if they're part of a community-based organization that wants to raise awareness about gay rights or women's rights, or aging or anything that feels appropriate. And so that's something that we think, there'll be smaller sections. So, for example, I can't show a feature-length film in my class. I don't have time, but we'll end up, with little snippets of the film and then questions and things like that.
Mhm.
So to hopefully make it usable in all different contexts.
I did want to get back to the film, but these are great questions. I'm so glad people are asking, and we still have some time if you want to enter a question in the chat in the Q&A. I wanted to ask you, Deborah, about the animation in the film, and it was so great to see it paired with Sally reading from her novel, The Wanderground, and you had that stunning animation sequence. How did that come about? Did you know you wanted to do that, or
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it ties into a couple of things. One is, in my previous film, I had hoped to do just little animated characters that were just little memes or something for all the different women in the film, and that was sort of a pipe dream that didn't come true because, you always have to have a pipe dream, and it doesn't always happen. So in this film, I continued to have that idea, but also it became clear to us, and in particular our editor, also co-producer Ondine Rary, it was very instrumental in this and read The Wanderground, which is, if people don't know about it, it was a classic fantasy novel that Sally wrote at the end of the 70s that imagined a women's utopian community where women could, communicate via telepathy and fly, and lived in the woods and escaped, by the way, from the city, which was represented the patriarchy. And so we wanted to find a way to integrate the Wonderground into the film, and animation seemed a natural way to do that. And so animation is a little bit trendy in documentary film these days, and we decided, well, what the hell? We'll do it even though it's trendy, and not because it's trendy, but despite the fact that it's trendy, it just seemed such a perfect way to bring in the Wonderground, and Ondine was really instrumental in helping us figure out how to make the underground kind of connective tissue for the film. And we just reached out to many animation artists, and couldn't find what we wanted. Set it aside for a while, and then Ondine said, "I had a dream." That we used a young San Francisco State student, and I'm like, okay, I'm a disbeliever. I don't believe in any of that crap, except I do believe in Ondine's dreams. And so I reached out to somebody in the animation department at San Francisco State, and she connected me with our animator, Maddie Montoya, who I think she's now the ripe old age of like 23 or 24, but was younger at the time. Just such a wonderful, and it was also totally fit in with our desire to bring in younger people as well.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so we felt very lucky to have her, and I'm really happy with the way the animations came out and brought to life this brought the Wanderground. So it was not just animation, it was like the bringing the idea of the Wanderground to life. And the idea of the Wanderground is really this idea of a utopian community which parallels Sally's land community.
mhm, mhm,
But it also really looks deeply at whatever you want to call it. People call it different things. Then they called it the patriarchy. People talk about toxic masculinity, etc. Really takes a deep dive look at that, and we have to look at that now. I mean, if you just look at the administration, it seems like almost everybody at the top has been accused of some kind of either an outright crime or a violation of somebody's rights or dignity. So again, that's something else that has really come back to be like, we need to be talking about this. And then the last thing, I wanted to say about the Wanderground is I read it. I can't even remember if I read it back in the day when it came out, but I certainly read it for the Sally film. And I am not a big sci-fi person. I'm like, I can't remember their names and why are they flying? And but I had many conversations with Ondine about it. And first of all, she would just go straight for the perfect piece. Uh,
mhm,
um, and second of all, I really came to realize that that was an expression of Sally's visionary brain. and we need visionaries. So I'm not a visionary at all. I can't imagine women flying, but literally imagining that women and gay people could be completely free and accepted was, you might as well imagine women flying back in the 40s and the 50s. So you need, just like, and I think when I talked to you earlier, uh, Loren, I had said, you know, when women were first fighting for women's suffrage, people thought they were crazy.
Mhm.
For women to be able to vote was inconceivable for people. So people have to be able to conceive of the inconceivable for us to be able to move forward and make progress in our world, whether it's for civil rights, women's rights, or gay rights. And so Sally had that quality of imagining a better world. And once you can imagine a better world, then you can tell people, hey, come on, let's make this better world.
Mhm. Do you think it'll revive some interest in the book? I mean, the book is widely available, but you have to know about it first.
Well,
That's
that was a whole
important.
process in itself. And so the book is out of print, but you can get it online. So you can get it, I think you can download it online. I explored figuring out how to get it reprinted, and then sort of hit a few dead ends and realized I kind of have a film to finish. I can't do this. And then I've had several people tell me, oh, you should just animate the whole Wonderground and make another film. And I'm like, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't you do that? So I hope it does. And, we actually made several of our pipe dreams come true, like including the animation and going to Virginia. I hope somebody else has that pipe dream and makes it true. It could be amazing.
And
It
someone
also
has
would be a big labor.
a big labor, and someone has
Yeah.
actually entered that question in the chat. They want to know if the whole film was, but you have answered that for us, Deborah.
Yeah,
That no, it
yeah,
is
yeah.
not an animated film yet, but you're
Not
right.
yet,
Wouldn't
not
it be? It
yet.
would
But
be.
if you're interested, reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'll introduce you to our animator and I'll introduce you to the person who has the rights to the novel. Uh, yeah.
Well, this has been an extraordinary conversation about this film, Sally. It's great to have it in GlobeDocs, obviously, but if people want to see it, we'll remind them what the website is again because someone else has asked that. They not want you to
Now,
repeat.
is there a way I can paste it in the chat or
If
something?
you go, Deborah, to these questions on the Q&A,
Yep.
someone said, can you repeat the
Okay. Can I
website?
just
Catherine
put it,
Target.
can I distribute it to everybody or only to the person who put in the question?
Georgia has put it in the chat.
Okay, perfect.
Yes,
And I'll
yes.
put it
Sally
in here.
Gearhart film, one word. Sally
Yeah,
Gearhart.
SallyGearhartFilm.com. It's Sally Gearhart film.com. And if you just Google Sally Gearhart film, it should hopefully come up for you.
It will. You might have to be a little persistent
Yeah,
with
yeah,
it because
yeah, yes, yes.
Deborah, this was such a pleasure. I thank you for illuminating aspects of your wonderful film, and I think the audience enjoyed it from the questions we got and spread the word about Sally. Sally exclamation. Uh,
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you to
well,
both.
thank you, and
And,
thank you all of
and
you who watched our conversation and submitted questions. Thank you so much, and best of luck going forward with the film.
okay, thanks everyone, and thank you for the comments in the Q&A. I appreciate it so much.